Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is June 13th, 2026. We're always positive these days, always feeling good these days, and wanted to do a live stream, talk to you guys a little bit about uh, how to do community management, how to bring people together, and places with purpose. So it's going to be a whiteboard video, and we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of concepts. And this is the first time in my life I think I've ever mentioned anything Foucault created. I'm not a postmodernist. In fact, I'm probably the antithesis of it, but he did come up with a really cool term. And the term that Foucault came up with is this idea of a heterotopia. And this is actually the reason why we're having so many problems in Cardano right now. So if one wants to take a look at Cardano, Cardano mostly is on X. And X is what we call a broadcast channel. So the purpose of a broadcast channel is to broadcast an idea, a message, a conversation, and the elation and dopamine addiction of a broadcast channel is speculation, spectacle. So people basically watch. They're addicted to the spectacle of the matter. They want to see what's going on. So you have Elon Musk. He's the edge lord trillionaire of our time. And Musk will say something like woke evil and then post some sort of rage bait. And then what will end up happening is lots of people, because he has over hundreds of millions of followers, will look at that and they'll engage. And those hundreds of millions of people, they will get angry. And your dopamine goes up. You get excited. It's elation. It's like the Colosseum of old. So effectively, it's spectacle and entertainment. That's what makes a broadcast channel so seductive and addictive. And it allows you to amplify all kinds of traits that people have. It allows you to amplify ego. It allows you to amplify narcissism. It allows you to amplify a sense of worth. And it gives you a feeling of false community. You think that the mob, if it's on your side, is your friend. Having been on both sides of it and being at a level of millions, I can tell you guys they're not. They never will be, never have been. So there's a real value in broadcast channels because it's a way you can rapidly reach millions to billions of people. And it allows you to discover things that power structures are hiding. But when we look at this concept of heterotopia, and it has a variety of definitions, but one I'd say is a real physical space that functions as a counter site capable of juxtaposing several incompatible sites or introverting the norms of the surrounding society. So, what the hell does that mean? Well, you think of things like, okay, you enter a library, and libraries, they have a purpose, don't they? Would you go to a library if a group of people keep coming into the library anytime you're there and start smashing pots and pans or loudly playing stuff on their phones or other things? It's not a very good library. You say, well, no, it has a purpose about it. It's a place of quiet contemplation. It's a place of study and reflection. So that's really a heterotopia specifically for purpose. So where is the Cardano community at? You guys say, well, we need to commercialize. We need to fund commercialization. It's kind of funny because some of my biggest critics say, well, Charles doesn't know how to commercialize. In the meantime, we have RealFi, and that's the bank, the unbanked, and it's a commercial venture. We have Pogon, That's the bring billions of dollars of Bitcoin XRP, Litecoin, Dogecoin, all these other things, Bitcoin Cash into our orbit for mutual benefit. We have Project Kaylee, which is Block Frost, and that's our ability to create decentralized infrastructure at a scale of billions of dollars. We have Midnight, and the success of any of these things brings TVL, transaction volume, millions of users and other things into Cardano. And, I'm putting my own money into these things. And every single time I've tried to say, hey, would you guys like to be part of it? The governance system doesn't seem to be able to get there. So we say we want to commercialize. We say, hey, that's a big thing. But when we do it in a broadcast channel, the spectacle of rage bait and tearing things down overrides a legitimate conversation of whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. And my argument is not the people, it's the environment. This is just simply put, the wrong environment for strategy. And this is the wrong environment for goal setting. This is the wrong environment for collaboration. This is the wrong environment for building. It's not the right environment. It's a broadcast medium. What do you broadcast? You broadcast your vision, your strategy, your successes, and why you're going to win. If we broadcast the dirty laundry of governance in a broadcast medium, what ends up happening is governance becomes rage bait. Governance becomes a fight and a spectacle. And any person who tries to bring something in, they fail. You tell me you like decentralization, but Daedalus failed. That's the only full node in the entire Cardano ecosystem at the moment, and it's not been funded. Because it's the wrong channel, it's the wrong medium. So what you need to do is you need to create a bespoke heterotopia for discussions about strategy, governance, and collaboration. So when we look at the Midnight Discord as in a case study, we currently have about 49,000 people in it. And it's an amazing place. I do a weekly lecture with the Night Force. It's incredibly positive. Everybody's showcasing what they've constructed. There's a lot of optimism and hope. There's very little cynicism. But more importantly, they're asking pertinent questions. There's a very strong dialogue of what is our strategy to win? What goals do we need to set to define win? And, how can we work together to facilitate, make that happen? So what's the parallel? What's the analogy? What's the equivalent in the Cardano ecosystem? Where can you go to talk about the strategy of Cardano and what goals we should follow and how we should do these things? So I anticipated this when I pushed SIP 1694, and I assumed that this space, this heterotopia, would be Intersect. And I said, oh, okay, well, Intersect is going to be the place where people naturally go and aggregate. But what I didn't anticipate is we were missing a step. So many people had existed on X that X had total domination over the zeitgeist of Cardano. And it was discussing strategy and governance and all of these other things. So when Intersect formed, what ended up happening is X overrode Intersect's ability to set goals, set all these things. And then a professional class of cynics and critics, rabble rousers, rage baiters basically formed. There's actually less than 100 of them if you actually do this, the social network analysis. And they actually are in control of most of the counter dialogue and narrative of Cardano. And they're overriding our ability as an ecosystem to converge. And they cite things like freedom of speech, and they cite things like decentralization and death to the founding entities, and everything is a scandal. And every single time when they cause harm or damage and they're proven wrong, they play the same game where they'll attack and say an absurd thing. They get hit by me or a founding entity. They play the victim and then try to aggregate as much sympathy as possible for this. And there's numerous examples. They don't need to be called out. You see it. So unfortunately, what happened is it prevented Intersect from forming that heterotopia, specifically to talk about matters of strategy, goal setting, collaboration, and other things. Now, upon reflection, a members-based organization that you have to join, and there's a ceremony and all this other stuff, it's not well suited to the social media world. So it was a bit naive to believe that naturally there would be a migration and these things would happen. The other problem was that the legitimacy of Intersect was challenged by one of the founding entities, by the foundation not joining at inception and joining the board and funding alternative MBOs. There wasn't a consensus that this is actually the inheritor of governance. We should all aggregate there as our heterotopia to discuss these types of things. Unfortunately, that created enough division that people could stay in the broadcast channel, which is not fit for purpose. So before we can get to commercializing Cardano, before we can get to growing Cardano and building executive function, we need representation, we need checks and balances, but more importantly, we need effective conversation. Effective conversation means that both parties, all the parties involved in the conversation, have three characteristics. They have empathy. They understand each other's positions. They're able to listen to each other to an extent to recognize that everyone in the conversation has something that they value and we're willing to understand, not necessarily sympathize, meaning that we actually want those values, but at least we can understand where those values come from. Effective conversation also has shared goals. Okay, so shared goals basically means that when we do the Venn diagram after we do the empathy and we understand what people value, there's some intersection point of common ground. And the third thing is aligned incentives. Aligned incentives, okay? So when you look at a structure like that, you say, okay, we can create a win-win scenario. We have a common ground, and everybody knows that we understand each other's things. And once you have that, you can construct goodwill and trust. And this is the basis of every negotiation. And this is the basis of every compromise. And this is the basis of every ability to move forward in any political debate, any corporate negotiation, any mergers and acquisitions. It's not about splitting the difference. In fact, there's a very famous book called Don't Split the Difference from Voss, who's a great negotiator, that talks about these types of things. But you need to have empathy, shared goals, and aligned incentives. You'll notice something here. When you look at those three lenses, you can't achieve those in a broadcast mechanism. There's nothing in Twitter and X that's built that creates empathy. It's quite the opposite. You broadcast your position and then you invite competition saying your position is the only position that matters. And then other people go and attack the position. And then the spectators view it as a game of win-lose. This medium is always win-lose. There's no compromise. There's no negotiation, because to win the game, your goal is spectacle. Your goal is growth of followers. By conflicting with Elon Musk, whether you win that particular argument or not, he has so many followers that some of them will become your followers in the process. So by engaging and fighting, you go from 5,000, Streisand effect, to 50,000 followers. And winning is defined as influence. How many followers do you have inside that system? Notice that we've made no progress. We've made no growth. We've made no ability to understand each other. we're incentivized to fight each other for spectacle and entertainment to gain influence, because influence is the reward function, the dopamine function, because you get more and more followers and you conflate that with a false community. So empathy's out. If you have no empathy, how can you understand what that person is trying to achieve? How can you understand that? You can't. So you have no shared goals. And if you have no shared goals, is it possible to align incentives? It's not. So by the very construction of the mechanism, you can't have an effective conversation. And if you can't have a constructive conversation, you can't set goals, develop a strategy to achieve them, and agree on how you're going to collaborate. And if you can't do GSC, set goals, create a strategy, and agree on collaborate, guess what? You can't govern. It's physically impossible. If you really understood what the Pokin proposal is, it's the best deal you'll ever see. You have this venture come in that I'm already funding. It's already near completion. I already have a lot of VCs want to be in it. We're going to aggregate a lot of capital, and Cardano can get a direct upside and make money every year from the running of this, which will increase the treasury. It was the same with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which right now would be up over 400% if we took it. But we couldn't get to understanding it because there was no mechanism to establish empathy. It was the critics, these less than 100 people, engaged and attacked, created spectacle and elation, and then D-reps, they sat on the outside and they say, well, here's the problem. I have a public vote, and it's us versus them. And the reality is, if I vote for something Charles says, I will be established as a sycophant of Charles, a follower of Charles, a member of the cult. So to show independence, I have to vote against the proposal, regardless of what the proposal actually is or benefits, to show that I'm independent. Because being independent is a higher social currency than being effective. But why are there sides? If you take a moment and step back and look at these three things, do I have an aligned incentive with the Cardano ecosystem? My entire brand and reputation, ability to raise capital and pursue goals and do things is tied up in the success or failure of Cardano. I'm still one of the largest ADA holders. And I care and believe in this ecosystem, want to see it grow, and I've made considerable sacrifices for it. So if I'm making a proposal, maybe just maybe the proposal is in good faith to try to make the ecosystem succeed. But if you live in a situation where it's always a fight and it's adversarial, the only interpretation of the proposal is Charles wins, we lose. Win, lose, win, lose. If I win, someone loses. We can't have a win-win conversation. It's not possible. So you have to have an effective conversation to establish the ability to set goals, create a strategy, and then collaborate. The next question is, with whom? Who are the group of people that we have that effective conversation with? Is it just community members? Is it DApp builders? These other things. So the next thing is a great concept called social physics from Alex Pentland. And it came from a lovely book that Alex wrote years ago. And Alex Sandy Pentland. And Sandy basically talks about this concept of idea flow. So what you want is a mixture of people within and a mixture of people outside. So you want your core to be the people with the strongest aligned incentives. That's your decision core. But you also want hooks into your decision core so that external ideas are welcome and they flow into the system. And there's a ton of cognitive tools that you can use to create that idea flow. So things like a pre-mortem, for example. You've heard of a post-mortem. The company fails, the endeavor fails. We do a post-mortem, figure out what happened. So a pre-mortem is you just assume it failed in the future, a year in the future, 2 years in the future, whatever, and you try to predict why it failed. What was the death of the entity? And that's an idea. So a strategy's been proposed, a goal's been proposed. We do a pre-mortem, pretend like it didn't work. We ask, why didn't it work? It challenges the assumption and it prevents groupthink. You can invite advisors to come in, third-party people to come in, a diversity of roles and personas. You can have scientists and engineers and commercial people and other things like that. But the more idea flow you have, what Sandy was able to show at MIT, he's an MIT professor, is the greater the probability of success of the endeavor. There's no exception to the rule. As long as you have a decision core. So the people who have the ideas, they don't necessarily get to decide what to do with them, but the ideas enter. And if you have an attitude of empathy, you can understand what's relevant in the idea and what's not relevant. So just like this conversation here, I really hate postmodernism. I think it's communism in another form, and it's just a dark and terrible way to go. But Foucault came up with some good ideas, or at least good thought experiments and concepts. And this idea of heterotopias and liminal spaces, really interesting, right? Specialized spaces to do certain things, whether they be rituals or learning or governance conversation. I can entertain that idea and I can hold that as something that's useful, despite the fact that I disagree with the philosophy as a whole. So your space has to have the ability for appropriate idea flow. But yet then it has to have a core group of people, and you determine that by whether they share goals and have aligned incentives. And if they share goals and have aligned incentives, well, then there's a way for them to succeed. So effective conversation allows you to set goals, develop a strategy, and collaboration. And what makes conversation more effective is idea flow. So you build a whole set of tools, cognitive levers, thought pumps or idea pumps, take a term from Dan Dennett, and this gives you the ability then to come up with really good ideas. Teardowns are a technological mechanism of this. We have no external teardown capability. You guys financed it. You didn't know you financed it, but you did when you financed ARC, which was the IOR proposal. One of the things my applied research and creative engineering division does on a pretty regular basis is we fork cryptocurrencies. So we forked NEAR and we forked other cryptocurrencies. We run them privately and we actually tear down all their technology. We look and see how their consensus protocol works. We look and see how their transaction model works. We look and see how you build the dApp. We look and see how their ledger logic works. And we actually get all these incredible ideas from it, because it turns out that the other cryptocurrencies in the world, they may actually have something to add. They may have actually done something novel and interesting. And those teardowns are incredibly valuable when we look at research, because we may realize that a problem's already been solved. So we don't need to go and build a completely different solution. Instead, what we can do is do what? We can go and just borrow, because many of these things are open source and patent free. So teardowns are a very valuable engineering mechanism for effective conversation, especially if there's a goal. Implicit in goals is also establishing KPIs. One of the biggest lies that the podcast medium tells everybody about me is I have no concern or care whatsoever for the price of ADA. And I don't think if it's a penny, it's any different than it's $3. And I don't care at all. It's a complete conflation and misunderstanding. Why? Because they're broadcasting at a broadcast channel meant to create drama and chaos. So taking words out of my mouth, manipulating them to that end creates the drama and rage bait. Of course, I care about the price of ADA. The price of ADA is directly connected to the security and the utility of Cardano. The nuance is, I say that the goal should not be maximizing the price of ADA because it's unachievable. And also, it means that what you're doing is you're throwing away all the other things that make Cardano special and unique. You say price maximization is the only goal. And here's an example. What if, let's say, pick your favorite company, Google, comes out of nowhere and says, you know what, we love Cardano's technology. So we want to do a hard fork. And what we're going to do is integrate Cardano into all of our infrastructure. But with the hard fork, we're forever going to control all of the consensus of Cardano. So the entire ledger is now centralized. But Google is going to integrate it into all their products. So you get all these new customers, get all these new things. ADA is going to be the currency of Google. So if your KPI is price maximization, it's the best deal in the entire world. The price of ADA will go up. Is that a good deal? Some people say yes, who are speculators. But the entire reason Cardano exists is to be decentralized infrastructure and say no person should run the show. No person should be in control. So my KPI is growth of the ecosystem, which entails, yes, growth of the value of the ecosystem reflected by the token price within the principles of the ecosystem. So growth with principles. And that is a very different thing than growth of the token price, because you don't have principles. That's my negotiation and bargaining position. So now you can have empathy with me and understand my position. So if you bring something to the table that can grow Cardano and it doesn't disrupt the decentralization, I view that as a net good because it increases the utility and influence of the ecosystem and the security of the ecosystem. If you come to me with something that decreases the level of decentralization and hands control to one actor that I can't revoke, I'm going to reject that, even if the token price goes up. That's my negotiation position. If we're having an effective conversation, now we understand each other. A podcaster is not going to understand this nuance. They don't care to understand this nuance because remember the game they're playing. It's this game. They want rage bait, spectacle, clickbait, controversy, angst, anger, failure, destruction. So they can make this number. They want to be the bearer of the chaos so that they can rule over the ashes. They can get more influence with their false friends who will turn on them in a heartbeat. So it's important that you have a space that you're able to have the conversation. You have lots of ideas flowing into it, and you create a baseline of principles. And you say, well, Charles, we can't create a baseline of principles of Cardano. Well, we actually did. That was one of the hardest things to do. We wrote down and had a constitutional convention. That was, the first step. There we go. We created a constitutional convention, and we have a constitution. It's ratified on chain. We have some basic principles about what it means for Cardano to be. And we have to ask, are those principles suitably aligned for growth? And if the answer is no, then what do? You go from Constitution 1 to Constitution 2, and you add in growth principles. That's the next iteration of governance. So you need some sort of space to be able to discuss these types of things. And then once you figure out those growth principles, guess what? You now have KPIs. then you can start developing strategies, and you do it through teardowns of other cryptocurrencies and their strategies. And you do it through analogy and using AI and these other things. And then once you have a strategy, you decide on collaboration. And the single biggest component of the decision of collaboration is the budget process. Why budget is chaos is we skipped the goal setting, the definition of growth, we skipped the strategy setting, and we went to budget. Why did we do that? Well, because the budget was originally designed with Intersect being the heterotopia for conversation. And when the CF came in and they said, you know what, we don't like this idea because we think it'll be the Charles Hoskinson show, or our goal is to make it so toxic Charles leaves and we can take over. There's a recent interview, I think, that actually kind of tries to convey that I'm just a community member, they're taking over for growth. By doing that, they actually damaged the formation of our ability to create common goals, create a common strategy, and then actually be able to grow the ecosystem. The hijacking destruction of the legitimacy of Intersect and the inability to move the conversation of these things meant we lost a core capability. We lost this process. By the way, you notice something? I didn't put a number on this process. Did I say only 10 people get to do this? Did I say 100 people get to do this? Did I say 1,000 people get to do this? There's no limit. You're constrained only by the efficacy of your conversation tools. And there's a different governance and social fabric that exists in this structure, and this can be very decentralized in nature, than what exists on the on-chain component. So when I say things like Discord, I'm not saying we abandon the broadcast channels. Actually, it's the exact opposite. There's plenty of broadcast channels, and we're not using all of them. Where is our TikTok strategy? Where is our Instagram strategy? You want to reach mainstream users. Where's our Facebook strategy? Where's our LinkedIn strategy? Where's our strategy for all these emerging social networks that exist? What's our YouTube strategy? What's our KOL strategy? These are all broadcast mediums. But the bigger question is, what are you broadcasting? And to all of these people who, again, they're win-lose and saying, no, freedom of speech. We have to do everything on X. Okay, so what you're broadcasting then is the governance fights, the drama, the divisions, the conflict. Do any of those things promote the ability for us to empathize with each other? No. Do any of those things allow us to achieve shared goals and trust each other enough to even share our goals? No. Do any of those things align our incentives? No. The incentives by the construction of the channels can never be aligned. So yes, you absolutely can try to host governance. And you know what? Don't take my word for it. Ask yourself this. Has this been fun for any of you? Has this been productive for any of you? Has this unified any of you? Do you feel like Cardano is on the right path right now? Do you feel like Cardano has a one-way trip back to the number 3 cryptocurrency, and it's just going to happen with absolute certainty? Or are you worried? Are you concerned? Do you feel like it may fall to number 30? Do you feel like Cardano is going to lose all of its best people? There's post after post on X right now of people saying, I don't want to be a D-Rep anymore. Pete just bowed out. Cash just bowed out. I don't like this anymore. I feel harassed and abused. I'm fatigued and tired, and I feel like I got nothing out of it. Because you're being gaslit by a very small group of people, again, less than 100, to divide you. You're being gaslit. A very small group of people. And they're convincing you that if only we kill the founding entities, then magically everything will just get so much better. No, we're a scapegoat. And after we go away and die, nothing replaces us. The chaos maximizes. And you know what happens is those people leave and Cardano dies. And they're winning right now because the medium supports them. The environment supports toxicity. Every single time somebody goes back to the beginning of Cardano, finds some anomaly, and then demands transparency, the only way it can be provided is some sort of independent audit. The auditor comes in, costs an enormous sum of money. The auditor answers the question. The answer is ignored or diminished, or the auditor themselves are attacked, and then another allegation comes. Case in point, 1090 BTC. You guys see this thing floating around. And I remember this number. I really do. I said, wait, where did that number come from? And I checked my emails. In March of 2016, Michael Parsons sent me an email from the Cardano Foundation, the Isle of Man, saying, hey, we need to be paid for the tranche 1-2 audit of the crowd sale. And the price is 1090 BTC. And you just look aghast. You say, my God, how could people charge so much money for something like that? How could they? This is the worst price in the world. Okay, well, let's take a look here. Price of BTC March 13th, 2016. Let's see here. Go to Google. You guys ready for this? Let me go ahead and share my screen. Straight out of Google. The closing price of Bitcoin March 13th, 2016 was $414. So that was about $400,000 for three auditors, Michael Parsons, John McGuire, and Bruce Milligan, to audit a high-risk crowd sale in Japan to verify there was no waste, fraud, and abuse. It's payroll. Now, what do you do? Spend another $1 million so a random person who's a bad faith person can then move on to the next thing, and then move on to the next thing, and move on to the next thing. It's the same for IOZeta. 2017, we made a public disclosure of all of our accounts and agreed to a voluntary 3-year vest. And guess what? We didn't touch it. We wrote it down from $1.48 down to 2.5 cents. And you know what happens? People retire, people leave. There's over 1,000 people that didn't put output throughout the years. Promises and commitments, including my co-founder who retired, got bought out. So the data gets distributed. Some hold, some sell. That's the nature of it. Every single company in the history of companies, that's how it works. And some people sold, some people hold. But apparently that translates into Gavin Wood, for some reasons, paid $200 million. And we dumped on you at $3. Everything. And it just all went to me. So what do? You can address it. Spend millions of dollars, then the next allegation, then the next allegation, because you're getting it yet. The purpose of the allegation isn't the allegation. It's the rage. And does any of this make ADA better? Does it grow the ecosystem? Does it make things happen? What's the recourse here? Magically, some way, somehow, everything will just get better. There is no recourse. It's destruction. It's win-lose. It's let's burn this party down or make it so unbearably bad that the party leaves the ecosystem and there's nothing to replace them. Because here's the thing. If all your governance lives here, you have to ask a question. This is an empathy exercise for all the people. Here's you. You're on the outside. And you're looking in. And you're seeing all of this. What are you seeing? You're seeing a dumpster fire. You're seeing flames. You're seeing destruction. You're seeing chaos. And I want you to ask a very simple question. Would you join? Do you want to be part of that? Would you invest your money, your time, your effort? You look at that chaos and flame and destruction, you say, would you build your business? Would you put your business on that? There are over 18,000 options. This is one of 18,000 options. One of 18,000. So you're telling me that if the whole thing is scandal A to scandal B to scandal C, and everybody's goal in life is to prove the people who built the system are evil and terrible and dumpers, and they just are the world's worst human beings, and everything's going to hell, and everybody involved in governance is fatigued and leaving, and every DAP on Cardano is failing, but you say to yourself, yes, I want to join that. Yes, I want to put my money in that. Yes, I want to build my business on that. If you are a sane human being, your answer is right here. No, I'm not going to do that. I want nothing to do with this. This is a train wreck. The analogy is that you're a therapist and you got a woman who's been married 8 times and has 10 kids from 9 different guys. And she's going on and on and on about how it's not her fault and all these other things. And at the end of the session, she's like, hey, you want to grab a drink? No, that's a train wreck. I want nothing to do with that. No. Ethics aside, my God, that cray. Don't put your dick in cray. No. Oh, God, no. I do not want to think about that. So when I say let's move the Discord, what I'm saying is let's move the governance conversations to Discord. Let's build an effective social fabric in Discord. So you know what? We can have our fights there. And we can figure all this stuff out there. And you know what? We can build empathy with each other. We could come up with some shared goals. Then we could update the Constitution to incorporate those growth goals and add in executive function and checks and balances and all these other things. And then we can all agree on a strategy. You know what we can do is have one budget. And then we have up or down vote. It gets approved. We move on. And we grow. Nowhere in there did I say that this whole thing got 5 people in and I pick them. Never once said it. But you'll notice something. The people here in the fire, they said that. Because deep down inside, they know they're probably not going to have a seat at the table. Because honestly speaking, what are they contributing? What are they doing for your bags? What are they doing to grow the ecosystem? They're the woman on the couch talking about the baby mama stuff. That's what they're doing. And they know that if this thing happens, this stops. They lose the followers. They don't have the rage bait anymore. They can't be the provocateurs anymore. And you say, well, doesn't that violate free speech? You say, okay, would you go to a library where every day the people show up with pots and pans? You say, of course not. So ask yourself this, should one person be able to veto the entire ecosystem? You say, of course not. That's centralized. So then should the dialogue of a small group of people be able to hold the entire ecosystem hostage? And now for 2 years, you guys have seen the end results of it. You've seen the chaos, the fatigue, the angst, the inability to coordinate, and the attempts to burn the founders to the ground. And even when we are commercializing, like RealFi, Pogan, Kaylee, Midnight, and we're trying to bring them in, what do these rage baiters do? They try to say, that's bad for Cardano. A token that you get paid in, that brings in TVL users and connections to other ecosystems and a new fresh narrative to help bring people in and show Cardano can list on Binance and Cardano projects can grow, is bad for Cardano? That only makes sense if you're this guy. That makes no sense at all for anyone on the outside. And what are you saying to this guy here? Would you build your business? They say, well, if I get the Midnight treatment, no, absolutely not. This is nuts. I don't want to be part of that. That's a train wreck. So do we keep the broadcast mechanisms? Yes, we do. After you're done with these guys, talk about marketing Cardano. That's what you broadcast. That's your brand. That's your marketing. Look at all the amazing things being built on Cardano. Look at all the amazing progress Cardano's made. Look at our 10-year vision. Look at our goals. This is what happens if we win. We're the good guys. That is marketing. And people get excited. And now you're here. You're this guy again. And you're saying, do I build on this thing? And you know what? If it's compelling, you say, yeah, these guys are a rocket ship. I want them to win. I believe in that vision. I think there's something to it. That makes sense. I'm gonna be part of that ecosystem. Now, you notice something here. Something I didn't say is lack of fights. You will have enormous fights and an enormous passion and tons of things said and all kinds of mean, nasty stuff inside this governance channel. But guess what? It's kept in the channel. It stays there. And there's codes of conduct. It's like Fight Club. You don't talk about it. You have the conversation there. We create common ground. And once we've created the common ground, we exit unified. And when you exit unified, then that's what the people see. If you have the fights up here, this is what the people see. So that's what I mean by moving to Discord. And that's what I mean about getting these things done. It's the next step, because the step prior, Intersect, was derailed by politics and pettiness and stupidity. It's the next step in trying to recover and get to a point where we can set goals, update the Constitution to reflect them, create strategies, and eventually converge to a collaborative structure and a budget that reflects that. Now, you're free to disagree with all this, but the burden then is on you to not just disagree, but propose an alternative structure. You don't get to just disagree anymore. You're part of the problem if all you do all day long is shit post and shit talk and don't propose any solutions. You're rage baiting. You're a nobody. And you deserve to have no voice in governance. You have to disagree with a viable alternative, and you have to explain to the entire community, just like I did, why your thing is better. Okay? And if it is, it is. And guess what? We do that then. This is not my ego. This is me having a real and frank conversation with you about how every single successful enterprise in human history has had to operate. You have to have a space for people to create trust, to negotiate and create goals, a strategy, and figure out how they're going to collaborate to achieve it. It can be a board of directors. It can be a political process. It can be an executive committee that's elected. There has to be a space for that to occur. And what I'm trying to tell you is if you leave it to X, you get what you pay for. Nothing. We've spent 2 years now with governance there. What is the price of ADA? What is the success of our ecosystem? Are we growing or losing people? That is objective reality. So if every person says, leave it there, then ask them directly. Then you tell me how this medium is going to make it better for us. What tools promote collaboration, trust, and sharing? In a negotiation, people have to give stuff up. All these people pushing allegations, what are they giving up? What incentive do they have to make your business better, to make your token go up? Nothing. They have nothing at stake except for the influence they gain by seeing the world burn to the ground. That's the harsh reality. That's the truth of the matter. So you got to think carefully about it. And you got to ask, do we want to be controlled by the tyranny of the pot smashers in the library, or do we want to create spaces to have conversations? And once we do that, guess what? You have rapid progress. I absolutely love the Midnight Discord. It's my favorite place because every time I go there, we're talking about how to make Midnight bigger, better, greater. And every person can't wait to come bring to me and show me the thing they're working on, the passion they have, the excitement they have. And it's special. There's no negativity. There's no cynicism. There's no debating or attacking. It's just a happy place because it's moderated. In the early days of the Discord, some people came in, they said, I'm going to go create a cancer where this is a referendum, where my only purpose is Charles Hoskinson's evil. I don't want to participate in anything, but I want to broadcast again and again and again. So we banned them. They, oh, you violated my free speech. You violated my free speech. And then suddenly the population of the Discord went up from 11,000 people to 49,000 people. And our ambassador group grew by 5x. And we have more people building. And somehow everybody's just getting along and having fun. And yet I don't own any equity in their ventures. I don't own any tokens in their ventures. And magically speaking, they seem to have a lot of influence too. Because the medium is not about your grievances with me or anyone else for that matter. The entire purpose of the medium is what? To create empathy so we can understand each other. To create shared goals, grow Midnight, and then to align our incentives. If Midnight succeeds, they succeed. Their business succeeds. Their endeavor succeeds. They get the value proposition of Midnight. That's the purpose of the medium. So that's my recommendation. You create a shared space like that for Cardano. And guess what you get very rapidly? A happy, positive place for governance to occur and for people to have great conversations. If any one of you think this is dodging tough questions, what are your tough questions? They're not tough questions. You've already made up your mind. You've already decided who the villains are and who are the angels. Your tough question's purpose is to convince other people of the villains. You don't care about the answers. You never cared about the answers. You never cared about the dialogue. So guess what? I don't care about you. The minute you adopted that, you died to me. You don't matter to me. and I'm never going to cooperate, participate, or work with you because there's no possibility of empathy. Would you go start a business with your ex-wife who hates your guts and spent the last 5 years torturing you and trying to weaponize your kids against you? No. Under no circumstances would anybody ever do something like that. It's a non-starter. So would you then participate in a dialogue and forum with a person whose only goal is to expose you as the evil, horrible human being you are? That vendetta has nothing at all to do with the growth of Cardano. That vendetta has nothing at all to do with the growth of the ecosystem or the embetterment of these applications. It's scapegoating. It's narcissism, pure, undiluted narcissism. It's my beliefs matter so much, everyone else must suffer for those beliefs to win. And that does nothing for anyone anywhere. So they have no place in that dialogue or that communication. They just don't. So you ban them. They cry about it in the broadcast medium. No one pays any attention because all the action is in the place that they have no access to. And then you make great decisions, especially if you have good idea flow. That's what prevents groupthink. And those great decisions build great products. You grow the ecosystem, and then, yes, it becomes a place that people want to build on. It becomes a place that people want to be part of, and they're excited about because there's a real mission, there's a real vision, there's real accomplishment. I never ran away from Bank the Unbanked. It's right there. I never ran away from let's make Bitcoin better. It's right there. That's how I got started in my career. I never ran away from we have a full commitment to decentralization. It's right there. I never ran away from privacy as a human right, and your freedom of association, commerce, and expression shall not be infringed. And verifiable reflexivity is the biggest value proposition, the building of trust. It's right there. That's where my money went. Yes, I have luxuries. When you got paid 54,000 Bitcoin and you joined the cryptocurrency ecosystem in 2011, and you were a founder of Ethereum and advisors to many projects, you accrue a few of them from time to time. But the overwhelming majority of my resources, my company's resources, and other things were all spent here and things like it to make the world a better place. That's the transparency. You know it, you see it, you feel it. A lot of people were connected to that. So we didn't lose the mission. And the success of these types of things meant that Cardano is the kind of place that can build those kinds of things. What does it tell this guy right here? I can do that too. I can change the world too. Or you can have this. It's a time for choosing. And sometimes you have to fire your patients, and sometimes you have to fire certain community members. It's part of growing up. If you have a toxic relationship, you got to leave it. Because at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, what are you going to do with the finite time that you have? I've spent more than 10 years of my life here, building and building and building. And I, like a lot of those people leaving Twitter, are saying the same thing. If this is what you want, I don't have any place or role in it. I want nothing to do with it. It will fail. And before it fails, it'll take every single thing it can from me. And then it'll move on like a cancer somewhere else. If this is what you want, not only do I want to be part of it, I think I can be a great leader in that structure and help you guys get not back to the glory days, but beyond them to make Cardano the #1 infrastructure. I believe that. And a lot of other people believe that too, and would get excited about it. Now, it's not easy. There's a lot that has to be done and a lot of work that has to be done, but it's your choice. It's a decentralized ecosystem. My job is to give you the options and tell you that. And you just have to accept them, and you have to decide. And if there is another option, a third option, somebody else make a video and tell us what that is. And you know, if it's better than this, I'll be excited about it too, because my 3 rules are we can have an effective conversation. We can set a strategy with it, and we can work together to accomplish it. That's what I want. Then we succeed. Then we grow. Or you can go back to the toxic hellscape that we currently have. It's really that simple. I'm happier than I've ever been leaving X. I'll broadcast to it because it's a broadcast mechanism, but I'm not on it. I don't engage on it. I just get reports on trends in these things now. And people will bring certain commentary or other things to me that are relevant. But I'm not there anymore. Why? Because it doesn't give me anything. It's a dopamine hack. It takes away, it distracts and robs you of your time, and it feeds the worst parts of your soul and allows them to grow unbounded in dark ways. I'd rather be here. That's where I'm happiest. Creating, building, collaborating in a place with a lot of love. You have to make a decision too about it. Thanks, everyone.